All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. We're glad to have all you guys here joining us, talking about Youth 101. My name is Zach Diaz. I'm the student ministries pastor here for Palm Valley, and my home campus is here, the Goodyear campus. With me is, go ahead.
I'm Steven Applegate. I'm the Buckeye students pastor. So about 15, 20 minutes from here, we meet up in a high school called Yonker High School. And so I get to be leader of that over there. So student ministries, what we're talking about is middle school through high school here at Palm Valley.
Yes. And our goal for today is we just kind of want to touch on a bunch of different topics. So we have 10 total, 10 different topics that we've learned as a church, as a ministry, and as pastors of the last several years, all of our ministry years of experience combined together, that have just been really beneficial for us as a church to create a healthy youth ministry and to really help students develop a strong faith that lasts beyond just their middle school and high school years and into adulthood. Yeah,
and there's going to be a couple things that we talk about, and I just want to kind of set the pace for today. If there's anything that Zach or I say as we kind of go through some of these things that's a little bit confusing, just real quick say, hey, what do you mean by that? Or, hey, can you explain that a little bit? We don't want to explain a point and have you be even more confused than when we started. So that would be not good at all. But we're excited to share some things what we've learned in student ministries.
Absolutely. And just in typical student ministries fashion, you normally try to package the gospel in a fun and engaging way for our middle schoolers and high schoolers. So what I want to do today, or what we want to do here, is for each topic that we're going to go through, we have with us a little spinny wheel right here, and we have some rubber ducks. So anyone who's willing to try, I would like you to guess one of the topics that we have thrown up there. So for instance, if you can see it from where you're sitting, we have equipping guide, we have students on mission, we have, I can't read to the side, but even handling self-harm and how we deal with situations like that. If you get it right where it lands on, you get a rubber duck, and if not, you lose your salvation. So yeah, that's how we do things here, right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, it's in the Word of God somewhere.
It's in the Word of God somewhere. Okay. All right. Anyone want to give it a shot? You just want to throw out a guess where we're going to land on. Okay. Awesome.
From Thunder Church, right? Thunder Mountain. Yeah. There we go. Let's go.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah. What church you from? And then what's your name too?
Thunder Mountain. My name's Ryan.
Ryan. Awesome. All right. These are cool rubber ducks here. Top of the line stuff. So of the options that you can see in the little text, which do you want to go for?
I think it's the protective of culture, is that what it says?
Protective of culture for 10,000.
Protective of culture for 10,000. Okay, let's give it a spin and let's see what it lands on right here. By the way, this program that we're using is Download Youth Ministry. Close, but not close at all. This is a program that we use to make for games a lot. This is their new kind of beta thing, so they're trying out some things new. But if you haven't heard of Download Youth Ministry, they are a great source. They have teaching, they have like series that you want to do with your youth. They have a bunch already written out for you with graphics and everything. They do trainings for youth leaders, but also they have a ton of games for fairly cheap. So they also have this program called Sidekick that we use where you can make your own games. Like I said, this is their beta version. So their older version was a little bit better, but I've messed around with their beta version and the potential of the things that you can do and what it's coming to, I'm really excited about. So, yes, you had a question. Download Youth Ministry.
If you just type in dym.com, it'll come up. And so Download Youth Ministry saves us every weekend if there's something that we need or things like that.
It's so nice too because they make games that are like really excellent, really well done that you can pay like $3 for. And that saves you so much time during the week where you know you're going to have a fun, excellent game for your students. And you don't have to spend all your time developing it. And now you can focus your time on writing content, connecting with volunteers, connecting with people, or pouring into students. So that is one great resource that we want to go through. When it comes to this topic, finding volunteers, we as a church, we are heavily dependent on youth mentors, our volunteers. Everything that we do, we could not do on our own. In fact, I had a weird weekend this weekend where a lot of our volunteers, almost all my volunteers were gone. We had like a young adult camp, so all my young adults were gone at the young adult camp. A lot of our adults had different things going on, and so I tried running services here at Goodyear like with just a handful of volunteers, and it was a struggle, man. It was difficult because when you have so many students, you need to have other people, other adults that care about teenagers that want to partner with you and are going to invest into the lives of these students. So we are very big on finding volunteers. We call them mentors who take time out of their week and out of their Sunday to connect with students, to pour into them, to love them, and to show them what it means to love God and love others. Now, finding volunteers can be fairly difficult. And so what we found is the best way to find volunteers is a couple different ways. One would be having a volunteer process as a church. So this is more on the structure of the adults of your church rather than your actual youth ministry. But one way that we found a lot of volunteers is we just push serving a lot as a church. And when people go on volunteer tours, they get to step into our room and they get to hear about what our ministry is about, what it is we do, what our expectations are for our volunteers, and how they can make a lasting difference through serving in our ministry. Our goal is to help people find their shape, where God has designed them and created them to fit. And so every single week or two, I would say, we have volunteers coming through, and me or one of my leaders have an opportunity to just grab these people, share with them, this is the vision of who we are, and basically give a sales pitch of this is why we would love to have you join us in student ministries. So that's one way that we kind of spread the word. Another is, this is also partnering with the adults in the churches. We have a highlight hour. Every once in a while, we as a church, we do like a portion of the service where a ministry leader will come up to the stage and will share about their ministry, what we do, and how we're looking for volunteers to be partnering with us. So even a couple weeks ago, Steven and I at both of our campuses got to step up on stage. We both got about 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, it was about 10 minutes.
Yeah, we got 10 minutes of the service where we both got to just share what student ministries is all about, why we have student ministries, why youth ministry is so important, why our teenagers should be joining us in our service and not just sitting in with their adults or with their parents, right? And so through that, we get to cast vision to the church of why this is a big deal and invite people to come and join us.
Yeah, it was really cool. I got to have a mom and a son up there as we talked about student ministries and kids ministries, and the mom served in kids ministry, and then her kid was a student who got to be like a beneficiary of student ministries. Like he's a middle schooler in 6th grade, so he got to connect in student ministries as his mom is serving there, and he had also served in kids. So it was just a cool like full circle moment that we got to share. But do we have a question somewhere over here? Yeah.
What did you mean by come to our service? Do you have a specific service that's for your...
Yes, so I mean we have a service for students, so coming to our youth group. We say our service, we make it like a specific service for middle schoolers or high schoolers, just because adults, they talk about things that doesn't relate to most middle schoolers, right? They talk about things like marriage. How do you have a better marriage? How do you deal with debt? How do you struggle with, they talk about anxiety, which applies to everyone, but what's causing you anxiety? Inflation and prices going up. That doesn't connect with the middle schooler very well. So we like to have services that are geared towards people's age group, so that way we can share the gospel packaged in a way that's appropriate for their age and where they are at mentally. Because psychologically, a middle schooler cannot handle a 35-minute message. They can handle about 10 minutes at most, and then they're gone. They're thinking about Candy Crush or something. Like, do people still do that? Is that still a big deal? Candy Crush?
I don't know. Middle schoolers are into a lot of different things.
The
now,
Fortnites or
yeah.
whatever. So yes, we do have our own service. That's why we have kids ministries too. It's the same thing. We're sharing the truth of Jesus in a way that's appropriate for them. Does that answer your question? Awesome. So those are two ways that we are kind of marketing to the church about who we are as a youth ministry. We do this for all of our ministries, so people get to see what everything's about, and people get to pick where God has designed them to be. But I would say the biggest way that we find volunteers through to join our ministry is through personal invitations. Personal invites, specifically going to a person and telling them, hey, I think you're gifted in this. I believe you would be a great youth mentor, is where we have found the vast majority of our youth mentors who stayed for the long haul. I even look at my ministry, like despite the fact that we have so many people coming in, checking out, and hearing about all the time, probably 60% of my volunteers are in there because me or someone else extended a personal invitation to them. So this explains why it's also important for us as youth pastors to be really integrated to the life of the church and not become our own separate thing. We also need to be having relationships with other people. And that's how you can find other people who would be great youth leaders. So I talk to parents. I've met some parents and got to know parents, and I've found parents who would be great youth leaders. Being connected to our young adult ministry and understanding some of our young adults who just getting to know them and inviting them to be a part of our ministry. I think of one person, Matthew Gomez, is someone who I met at a young adult ministry. I got to know him, and the more I got to know him, I was like, dude, you'd be a good youth mentor. I invited him to do it, and at first he was like, nah, I don't want to. I don't really see it. But he's like, Zach, I trust you, so I'm gonna give it a shot. And he came and he checked it out. And after a couple weeks, he's like, I'm all in, and I want to serve at multiple services times. Like I want to be here all the time. And that came from a personal invitation. So the best way I have found to find volunteers to join you is not waiting for them to come to you, but to be prayerfully asking God to reveal people to you that you can go and send an invitation towards. And if you don't know anyone, ask the people involved within your ministry. Ask other pastors, ask other leaders, ask your students. Hey, who are adults in the church that you respect? Those are great people to find.
Yeah. Did we want to go to the next one?
Yeah.
Cool, we got 10 of them, so we're going to try and whip through some of these. So
we're passionate, so we'll just keep going. That's my fault.
All right, how are we going to pick let's see, anyone from here? Which one do you guys think is going to be next? We can't really see with the funny volunteers thing on there.
It's a beta.
Protective of culture? Okay, cool. So that's, and what's your name and what church are you from?
Denise, Turning Leaf Church.
Denise from Turning Leaf Church. There we go. Let's see what it is. We hope. Did it land on the same one? All right, let's try it again.
Making volunteer stick. There we are.
All right. So making volunteer stick. So this is one thing that I'm really passionate about. And so when you think about making volunteer stick, like Zach was saying, and you're going to hear this is like a central point to all the things that we do. If you have a weak volunteer core, you probably will not be growing your ministry, especially in students. And so as you continue to look for volunteers to be serving in your ministry, the biggest thing is to make sure that they remember and are reminded consistently about how much they matter to you, how much they matter to the ministry. And I'm talking like being annoying with it, like to the point where they could never forget that they are a crucial part of the team. Because as you think about making volunteers stick and what that looks like for your ministry, you want them there for the long haul. What I tell people in student ministries all the time is if you want to check out student ministries, understand that it is a commitment. Like it's a commitment, not in the sense of, there's a lot of different levels of a commitment where you could serve in student ministries. If you're not there every single week, they're not going to be able to connect with you. When students are going through, whether you're in middle school or high school, and you're going through something difficult, they need someone to be able to talk with on the weekends. They need someone to be able to connect with throughout the week. And if you're one of those volunteers where it's like, I can kind of be there like maybe twice a month, but that's all that I usually point them to a different ministry. Because in student ministries, we need people that are going to stick and be there for the long haul. And so something that I've really championed being out in Buckeye is where it kind of feels like a small town feel. Even though Buckeye is growing tremendously, I've always tried to make our church feel small even as it grows bigger. And so what I do to make volunteers continue to stick is make it like a family mindset when you get over there. And so what I mean by that is every couple months when we have a team hangout or a meeting, instead of just kind of being like, hey, we're just going to meet up at, some restaurant, we'll talk there, I invite them over to my home. I want them to be actually my parents' house because inflation, you guys know what I mean. So it's like I live with my parents, me and my wife, but hey, humble here. So we invite them over to my parents' house. And we make a meal or we cater something in, and we just sit around the couch and we talk about things. We talk about how our lives are. We talk about what's been going on throughout each other's week. Because here's the thing about making sure that volunteers stick is you don't want it to feel like what they are doing is a transaction. You show up on Sundays, you serve my students, and then you leave and you repeat it. That's just a transaction. I only like you because of what you're doing for me. See, making volunteers stick is helping them understand you are gifted in so many incredible different ways. You are unique, and you have things that literally our volunteers can do that I cannot do, that you cannot do. Think about it. You have volunteers in your ministry that are going to reach a specific group of students and people that you could never reach. I'm a male, so when I'm preaching, there's going to be some ladies in the room that maybe some of my examples didn't really hit. Maybe some of the ideas or topics that I share, they're like, nah. Whereas one of my female volunteers might say the exact same thing. They're like, that was the greatest thing anyone's ever said to me. And it's like, well, it's because they have that sphere of influence. And so you want to be able to capitalize on the different things that your volunteers can do, but that starts by helping them feel welcomed and part of the team. And when they're not there, when they call out sick or maybe they had a Sabbath or something, dude, I'm writing a postcard. I'm letting them know, hey, hope your Sabbath went great. We missed you. We missed you a lot. Like Zach was sharing, it can be so difficult to do things without volunteers there. In Buckeye, we set up and tear down every weekend. We have these 6 stages every single weekend, and each stage is like 100 pounds. And I don't know why they have to be so heavy. Yeah. And so every Sunday, we'll take the carts out, we'll set them up, and every Sunday service gets done, and we pick up the stages and put them into the cart rack. Well, one weekend, like 2 or 3 of my volunteer guys were out, these big burly boys, and they were gone. And literally it was me and like 2 other people who just weren't nearly as strong as these other guys, which is fine. They had different strengths, figuratively speaking, you know. So, and I reached out to both those guys throughout. I'm like, hey, we really missed you this last week. You do so much in student ministry. We're thankful that you're here. So they know, oh, I wasn't there, but I was missed. You know how cool that is to feel like you weren't there and you're valued and you're like, man, I want to be back. Whereas if they're gone and they call out, all right, see ya. And then like, why am I there in the first place? You didn't even miss me. You didn't even feel like I'm part of the team. So be asking yourself this question: what am I doing to make my volunteers stick? And when was the last time that you told every single one of your volunteers that they matter, that they're valuable, and that you are thankful that they're part of the team?
Yeah, people need to be known, and where people get found and like are known, especially in a larger church, is through their teams. And so I think that's perfect, Stephen. Like you're sharing that if they're on your team, that means it's your job to make sure that they're part of your family and that they felt like a family member. Okay, so next one that we want to go to. Which one did you just share?
It was making volunteers stick.
Making volunteers stick. Okay. Anyone else want to give it a shot on what they think it might be? Okay. All right. Share your name and which one do you think it is?
Neum, protective of culture.
All right. Are you guys going to keep on going for it?
We're just all going to go for it until
We're just going to go for it until it happens? Let's hope for it. I hope for it. Hey!
Yo!
All right, you got a rubber duck. There's some cool ones. There's green ones. I can't see color, so I don't know what color it is, but
That's pretty
awesome.
Cool.
That's a fire rubber duck. I love it. Okay, so we put protective of culture. I actually like to say this, that we are ruthlessly protective of our culture. We are ruthlessly protective of our culture. And the reason why we say ruthless is because people's natural bend is not healthy cultures. People's natural bend is to kind of hide away and shelter themselves and stay comfortable. Especially when we want to create a place where people feel like a family, just like how Stephen was just sharing. We want our volunteers to feel like family. That's amazing and that's beautiful. But once they feel like family, they don't want to talk to the students. They want to talk to one another. And now you have this group of adults who are acting like your teenagers, circling up in the corner of the room, having a conversation, not interacting with anyone else in the room. And that's not the kind of culture we want. When you guys define the kind of culture that you want to have as a ministry, you have to be ruthless in holding people to those standards to meet that culture, because people don't naturally bend towards a healthy culture. They naturally want to create unhealthy habits. And so you have to hold people to that standard. And the way we do that, one, is by communicating what the culture is. Many of you, I handed when you guys first came in, was the volunteer guide. Our volunteer guide, we're gonna go more into that, but that is what we communicate to everyone on. This is the standards of who we are. If you didn't get one, I'll try to get one to you later on for some who came in later. That whole guide talks about our expectations for our volunteers, but also what we want our volunteers to live like. Like this is the culture of who we are, and this is what we expect of you. after they kind of go through our equipping guide, which we spend time pouring into them to develop, we have all of our volunteers signed a covenant. We have them sign a covenant. They sign an agreement saying, I am committed to being a part of this ministry and serving God in it. On our covenant, we basically, what we ask of our volunteers is that they're protecting the unity of the ministry, because nothing falls apart faster than a ministry that's divided. And that's the devil's number one goal. He wants to cause division amongst your ministry, and when he does that, he destroys the potential to move people towards Jesus. So we have them sign a covenant saying, I will do whatever I can to protect the unity of my ministry. Believe it or not, guys, adults gossip too. So we lay out that you are agreeing that you're not going to gossip. And if you have a problem, either you have a conversation with that person, or if you have a problem with me, come talk to me, man. Let's have a conversation about it. So that way we can stay united. We don't have to agree on everything, but we need to be united together. So they have to be united. They are committed to fulfilling what our equipping guide is. And lastly, they're committed to growing in their own faith. Because a mentor needs to be someone who's also drawing closer to Jesus in their own personal walk. So we give them the equipping guide. We set the standard of this is what our culture is. We hold them to a high standard by saying you are agreeing right now that you want to be a part of this culture, that you want to do everything you can to make sure it's healthy, that you're buying into this vision. And then the next thing that we do is we have hard conversations in private, praise people in public. Hard conversations in private, praise people in public. So that means if a volunteer is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, we will pull them aside, have a one-on-one conversation, and just say, hey, this is a reminder of what the equipping guide looks like. So it's that one-on-one kind of conversation there. But when they're doing something good, you just don't just want to say, hey, Steven, you're doing a great job when you're talking about family. But instead, sharing with the other volunteers whenever you meet with them. We have a final five every week. So we close out service talking to all of our volunteers, praying together. And those are great moments where we say, hey, guys, I just want to point out, Steven did this. This action that he did right here resembles of how we are a family. And you're highlighting that action and you're highlighting that person in front of everyone. That's positive reinforcement. In fact, Steven, you have some amazing stories of how that helped in your ministry, right?
Yeah. And so just with things like this, I had shared this actually last year as well. There was just a volunteer that I had that was continually showing up just a couple minutes late to service. And I'm like that was a hard one just because we want them there before service, so as students are showing up that you can kind of be like, hey, welcome in, what's up? And so I had found that me, every couple weeks being like, pulling her aside and being like, hey, I really need you to be here a couple minutes early. I want, that really wasn't working. Well, one week, she had showed up about 15 minutes before service had started. And I was praising her like a baby who just learned how to walk. Like that's literally, like she had walked in and I was just like, thank you so much for being here 15 minutes early. This just really helps students feel welcomed when they walked in. And I'm really glad that you made this a priority. She had never been late again after that. Sometimes it just takes volunteers being praised in front of people, understanding, wow, thank you for that. That makes me feel really good. We don't know which volunteers you have that maybe words of affirmation is like their top love language. You just wouldn't know until you make sure that you're praising them in front of the rest of your volunteer team. So,
yeah. So he hard conversation in private, but praised in public. Lastly, the one I want to go over for protective of the culture is we have volunteers who their entire job is to protect the culture. Those are volunteer leaders. Actually, Titus, can you raise your hand in the back? He's my volunteer leader for our high school service. So yeah, give him a round of applause. That's cool.
Let's go.
His entire job as our mentors, as our volunteers are caring for the students, his job is to care for the volunteers. So he is responsible for their emotional care, their spiritual care, and holding them accountable to fulfilling the culture of who we are. So while we're connecting with students, while we're doing service, while I'm preaching in the other room, Titus will grab one of our volunteers, bring him to the side, and just ask, hey, how are things at home? How are things at work? Hey, how can I pray for you? Oh, hey, by the way, I've been noticing you've been kind of showing up late recently. Can you remember in the equipping guide it says that you're supposed to show up 20 minutes early? I'd love to see you do that this next week. And then he can be the one who highlights people because he's the one who runs our final prayer at the very end. So he can highlight the people that he had these hard conversations with. So as youth leaders, it's hard because you're trying to juggle so many different things at once. It's so helpful when you designate one person whose entire job is to care for those people, and they're the ones holding people accountable. And now all I have to keep accountable is Titus. He's the one that I'm caring for emotionally. He's the one I'm praying for, and he's the one that I'm holding accountable to. Awesome. All right, cool. Let's move on because we like to talk. All right. Who wants to give it a shot? Beck, do you want to give it a shot? Just give it a guess. Yeah, this is what we do. We just throw people under the bus. Students on mission. Okay. Let's see if you also get a really cool duck. Oh, no, it's a nice try. Remember the name game.
All right. So this one is great. Raise your hand if you feel like you are good at remembering people's names. Okay, we got one. There we go. That's awesome.
Woo, yeah, give a round of applause. Let's celebrate him.
All right,
Yeah,
so
praise you in public.
so what's my name? No, I'm just kidding. I just put him on the spot. And so in student ministries, in every ministry, but specifically student ministries, when a student will walk in, whether in middle school or high school, what they want to hear is their name. They want to say, Steven, how are you doing? Because it's not just like, hey, man, hey, bro, how's it going, dude? Those are all names that's you saying, I don't know your name, so I'm going to give you a generalized kind of like slang here until I can read your name tag. And so there's going to be newer students that are there for the first time that you're not going to know their name, and that's completely fine. That's like your pass, you know. First-time guest students that show up, it's like you don't know their name. So you want to make sure that you get their name and remember it. But what I've found is us to just be able to say, well, I'm just not one of those people who am good at remembering names. That's kind of an excuse. And I'll be real with you, because I've heard that from everyone, including myself. So I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. I'm also vulnerable of that. I've done that before. I'm guilty of that before, saying that. And so what I found is there's things that we can put in place within conversations to help us remember someone's name. Now, there are people who maybe get it on the first try where others don't. But we all should be diligent in finding ways that work for us to remember names. I'm going to share just a couple with you that have helped me. And so afterwards, when Zach and I get done, if there's something that you want to share on maybe learning names or just something about youth ministry that has helped you out, share, let us know. But I found that two things have really helped me learn a student's name. So if I was walking in and you were a new student, what is your name? Hello, Tony is here, and you are from Unleashed Church. But say he was a student walking in, and Tony walks in. So what has worked for me is you, in the conversation that you're about to have with this new student, you want to say their name back to them 3 different times. Yourself, say their name to them. And you know what's crazy is every time you say their name, they like jump back in. Because your name is your favorite word. It's just the human language. It's just when you hear your name, you jump back in. And so if Tony walked in, I would say, Tony, how's it going today? He'd be like, awesome, great, I love student ministries. Tony, so what's something that you enjoy doing? Okay, Tony, tell me about your family. Do you have any siblings? Tony, that is great. That was 4 times in like 15 seconds. But it's repetition. It's repetition. So now when I'm thinking and I look back, I'm like, it's with the T, it's Tony. And so that has helped me make sure, just a quick one, making sure that you're getting in. Also, it helps with pronunciation. Maybe they have a name that's really hard to pronounce, or it's something that's spelled super weird, and you're like, what is that? And then you ask them, and then you saying it back to them, they can correct you. So maybe Tony was actually Tanya, and it's like, what? I meant, no, it's Tanya. So then you're correcting that. But another thing that I have found is you want to be able to connect a name with an activity or a thing. So you are talking with a student. Tony walks in. Tony has a soccer game on Wednesday. Why is that important for you to remember? Not only one, you can write them a postcard that week and say, hey, good luck at your soccer game. I'm praying for you. But you know what that does is remembering that event. Tony walks in. It's on the tip of your tongue, and you're thinking, I know his name, soccer. He's playing a soccer game on Wednesday. Tony, how was your soccer game? That does two things now. Not only did you remember their name and it makes them feel very welcome, you went above and beyond and asked them about something personal in their week. It's twofold. It helps you remember their name and it helps them feel extra special, being like, not only did this guy remember my name, he wrote me a postcard letting me know that he was praying for me during my soccer game, but he remembered the soccer game that I was a part of. That will move mountains for you in your ministry, and you will see some of these first-time guests on their second time already being back. This is my second time here, and you already remember. That will get them to buy in to the ministry. Because I can guarantee you, every other church that they've been to, or maybe a different youth group or something, they probably didn't remember their names coming back. I know how I feel when I walk in, and you just know that look that that person gives you, and you give that person when you don't know their name, and that awkward kind of like, you know how much confidence you can have when you walk in? Tony, how was the soccer game? Did you win? Yes, he did. So it was awesome. And so you just need to be thinking, what can I be doing every single week that will challenge me to not only remember their name, but create a connection? What's that connection? Create a neural pathway in your brain so the next time you see them, what's that trigger conversation? What is that trigger thing that you talked about that will bring you back? And your volunteers that you have, that you lead, be challenging them. Hey, is there anyone in this room right now that you don't know their name? Cool. By the time that they leave, you better know their first name. Because why are there people in your ministry that you don't even know? We're not going to be experts of this. There's always going to be grace. There's always going to be places that we have weaknesses in. But if God has gifted you with people in your ministry, if God has given you a flock to look over, do a good job. Be a good shepherd and figure out who they are, what their name is, so every single time they walk into the house of the Lord, they feel welcomed. Because one of my passions is making sure that no one ever leaves a church service feeling like they haven't been seen, talked to, listened to. The worst thing that we could ever hear in student ministries, but especially just at church, is I showed up to your church and not a single person said hi to me and no one knew I was there. Yeah. If you hear that, like, I don't care who's in charge. I don't want to be at that church either. If I walk in and I found that out that a student walked in and no one greeted you, no one called you by name, no one asked you how you were, I wouldn't invite you back either. Because obviously this place isn't welcoming. So be challenging yourself. What do you need to do to make that first connection? You remember their name, I promise you, you have a much better chance of them coming back the next week because now that's home for them. It's not just another random place. Yes. Yes, we totally do have them wear name tags. Every week they'll get checked in, and it's a really good way to get a metric. So that will save you. What the challenge is, though, is when they're walking in the door before they get checked in, you want to call them by name before that. That's kind of like the challenge that I give to
Or the students
my
that like to put their
volunteers.
name tag on the bottom of their shoe.
Yeah, I'll be calling students and like, one of those first-time guests where it's like, I just got your name, and where's your name tag? Put it on your shirt so I can see it. What's up? Planning Center, yeah. Yes. Planning, thank you for that. Yeah, Planning Center, we do that, and so that's really cool for metrics and things like that as well. So.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. What I think I really liked about that is like when you remember their name, the second week they come back, they're not the new guy. No one likes being the new guy. They're the
exactly.
They're Tony, the soccer player, which is so much better.
Yeah,
all right.
Thanks,
You want
Tony.
to give it a shot? You want to go? Okay.
How about equipping guide?
Equipping guide, yeah, awesome. All right, let's see. Is it equipping guide to keep your soul in salvation? Oh no.
Jeez.
Probably the most positive one up there. Okay. Awesome. Handling self-harm. Now, this one's going to be really quick just because there's so much on this topic about handling self-harm that we just do not have time for here today. The thing is that self-harm, suicidal thoughts, crisis. You think crisis is not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when. It's going to happen. And so we need to be prepared for when those moments do happen. So I want to give you guys resources, some homework for you guys to look into that are fantastic resources that teach you how to be ready and to be available for not if these things happen, but when they happen. First one I want to share is a website called ministrysafe.com. Ministrysafe.com. They have training. I don't think it's that much. I feel like it's like $15, $20, something like that. They have an hour-long training on sexual abuse. It gives you information on how common it is, which is really sad how common it is. It's a really big deal. When I heard the numbers of how many students are sexually abused by the time they turn 18, I didn't believe it until I started connecting with people more and having conversations and learning how many of our teens actually have experienced some kind of sexual abuse. It's far too common. So they give you a lot of information of what the stats really are, but they also share with you what predators do, what their strategies are, what are the red flags to be looking out for, and how to have the proper guardrails as a ministry. So that way, someone that's trying to prey on the youth of our ministry, which, by the way, youth ministries are one of the top places that predators look to be a part of. It's the number one place, actually, that they look to be a part of. I think it's top 2 or 3, because it's a place where you step in and you are automatically trusted by the adults and parents of the room and have access to teenagers and kids. So they might pose to be believers. Sometimes they even are. But that resource will help give you the signs of when someone is trying to prey on the students and have the proper guardrails up, so that way you can prevent things from happening. Yeah.
Have you noticed anyone like that trying to enter into your ministry?
I have, I'm very good friends with all the other youth pastors in our area. We meet up once a month. Some of the other youth pastors have volunteers who are now in jail over situations. So I do know situations that have happened because of that. I've had volunteers that have raised red flags, but those were typically conversations of like, hey, this right here is not okay. And in my experience, they've responded well to the feedback and haven't continued. Because that's the thing, is like sometimes people they don't realize what they're doing is a red flag. They don't realize so I'll give you an example. One of my male volunteers likes wrestling, and he liked wrestling some of the boys. But roughhousing wrestling is a sign for someone who is a sexual predator, because you're touching them, and it's an easy way to mistakenly touch them in a wrong way, right? Had one conversation with him, told him how big of a deal it was, never did it again. And it's not been a problem. So thankfully, if it was continuing to be a problem, he wouldn't be volunteering here anymore. It's kind of like a strike 1, strike 2, you're out kind of situation with things like this. Okay, the next resource is, this kind of only applies for people who are more local, Southwest Family Advocacy Center. This is a center that I'm sure if you're from out of state, from somewhere else, you can probably reach out to and see if they have other connections. But it's a center that kind of, it just provides knowledge on what to do when someone is harming themselves and how we are legally supposed to respond as adults. And they provide free training for you and your staff. If you just ask them to come and to show up, they'll send someone over free of charge, and they'll have a whole class kind of like this teaching you exactly what to do when you have any kind of concern for abuse of any kind.
What was the name?
Southwest Family Advocacy Center. Let me pull up their website real quick. Southwest Family Advocacy Center. Their website looks like this, if that helps. If you want the specific name later, come find me after and I can give it to you. But I got this from a youth pastor friend, and they came in, they did a whole training for our entire staff and just gave us like hey, here are signs, here are things to look out for, and if you have any problems that arise, this is exactly what you do if you find a student who claims to be abused, or you're finding bruises on their arms, or any of these situations. Which is very helpful, because the worst thing to happen is if something happens, everyone's looking to you as the leader and you have no idea what to do. Nobody wants that. And no one wants that to happen in general. So, all right. Let's move on. I feel weird now doing this after. Stephen, why don't you give it a shot? Why don't you give it a
Let's go equipping guide.
Is it equipping guide? We'll see. Also, fun fact, you can rig this. If you notice, we're going back and forth. This whole thing is rigged. I don't remember the order. But the cool thing about this program is you can rig the answers too. So little behind the scenes. It is rigged in a specific order, so that way we go back and forth.
You weren't supposed to say that.
Yeah.
But that was
The
like
whole point of this thing is to take
whole-
off the veil and so people
So,
can see behind the curtains, you know?
This is one that I'm very passionate about, and this is specifically on student ministries. And so what we need to understand is in middle school and high school, especially the younger age students, their attention span is quite short. Very, very short. And so if we're to get up there and preach for 35 minutes, just don't, first of all. That 35 minutes is a very long time. But I've found that there are ways to connect with students in as you're teaching messages that will work, that will help you make those connections and keep their attention. But it's going to require a lot from you. It's going to require a difficulty and challenges, but it's something that has grown me as a communicator a ton. And so I want to share this with you. And so when you are talking with middle schoolers and high schoolers, something that I've found is if you want to get deep with them, if you want to share something that's heavy, don't ever start with that. Don't ever start with something heavy or deep. If you're going to make them cry, at least first make them laugh. Right? If you want to bring down their walls, because even if it's a student who's been there a lot, they come in with walls to protect themselves. They come in with walls understanding, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get exposed. I don't want to get made fun of. I don't want to. So they come in with walls. If you can get them laughing in the first 3 to 5 minutes of your message, you have them. You have them because that means they were able to be comfortable enough to laugh. So what does that mean? I share a personal story where I am never doing something like really, really cool and awesome. Like if I opened up a story and I was like, man, I was like a 5-star collegiate athlete and I threw for 40. Everyone's like, cool, bro. Thanks for like showing off in front of everybody. But if I'm making a joke about how like I fell off a bike, split open my elbow, blood everywhere, I'm like doing all, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. I shouldn't ever be bragging about myself in a story. Because then it's like, man, well, where's your ego, bro? But if you can share a story that puts you kind of in the vulnerable light, then they want to be vulnerable. Then like, oh, man, this guy is human. You have to make yourself human to the people that you're talking to. Because if you just look like a walking highlight reel, they don't want to hear anything from you. Me and Zach were at a youth camp like way back, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And the pastor gets up there, literally shares a story about how he walked into a college party. There was like 40 people there. And at the end, he somehow saved all of them. Like all of them prayed the salvation prayer that night. All 40 of them prayed the salvation prayer. He saved all of them. 40 people, walks in, saved them all. I'm like, what's the point of this story?
Which, by the way, real quick, like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you have a cool story, awesome. Like, that's that guy's experience, amazing. I think the problem was that all his stories were highlight reels.
Yeah.
All his stories were about how great he was and all the amazing things he did. Like, he never shared a failure within his life.
Yeah, so then I'm hearing that, I'm like, man, I don't know the last college party I went to where I saved every single person there. Like now, am I doing a good enough job as a Christian? And so when we share stories that are a little bit vulnerable, they're going to be open with you. They're going to be honest, and they're going to apply the things that you're sharing. But not only should you be vulnerable with them so that you can bring their walls down, get them to laugh, but also when you're communicating with students, you only have a split second to make a connection. And you know what hinders the connection that you make with the students? I'll show you. It's if you are preaching, and the entire time you are preaching, you are just reading off your notes. So in Matthew 5, it says that now you have created a barrier in front of your students. Now you are not talking to them, you're talking to them through a barrier. That is distracting. And don't be surprised if you are talking with something in front of you and you're looking down at notes, that the second you look down, students disconnect. Well, he looked down, so I can look down. He looked at his phone, I can look at my phone. But if you pull this out of the way and you start moving around the room, making eye contact, well, now we're having a conversation. Middle schoolers and high schoolers, they need to have a conversation with you. They don't need to be preached to for 45 minutes. But you know the challenge that this brings to you? You're going to have to memorize your notes. You're going to have a good recollection of where you are going with your message. And it takes a lot more work than getting up there and preaching a message. You kind of know what you're going to say, but thank God for my notes because I'm just going to read them off to you anyways. Here's the thing. I went up to speak at our Buckeye campus in adults, and Pastor Darius, which that guy's incredible. If you haven't met him personally, speak with him. He, I believe, is one of the greatest communicators that you will ever meet. I was going up to speak in the adult service, and I remember going up there. It was my first time in Buckeye preaching, and I said, okay, so we're going to get up there. He's like, yep, you're going to go right up there. There's going to be this table behind you because we were going through all of the entire Bible. So every time we jumped through a couple chapters, there'd be like some kind of thing that we'd put on the table to like represent what that was. So I get up there and I go, okay, the table's back there. Where am I putting on my notes? Like, what am I going to do with my notes up here? And he said, the table's back there, and you'll have a chair that you can sit on. And that was kind of the conversation. And he was making it very clear, well, you don't need a table. You're going to get up there and you're going to preach. You're going to preach and you're going to have a conversation with the audience. He does that every Sunday. He gets up there, his Bible's there. I'm not saying memorize, 40 verses of Scripture. If you need to, go back to your message or grab your Bible and read from that, do that. But do you know your message that you're talking to your students about? Do you know it well enough that you can just have this open, flowing conversation? And if you don't, ask yourself, do I need to spend more time on this, or is this too complicated? If you can't even remember it yourself, I promise you your students won't remember it. If you can't remember the message you're going to speak to the students, how are they going to remember it either? So when you get up there, create some kind of method. You can ask me afterwards or tomorrow what specifically my method is. There's a book called Communication for a Change by Andy Stanley, which a lot of pastors here communicate out of. It's a me, we, God, you, we method. It's 5 points. That's what I use for every single message. I can go in depth on what that means and how to do that later, but it has transformed my communication with students and in adults when I get up there and I can preach it and it doesn't matter where my notes are. You know how much confidence that gives me knowing, okay, I just finished this point and I know exactly where I'm going with it. I can move with confidence, but I have to preach it 3 or 4 more times before I get out there. But if you have to be in the Word more and take a little bit more preparation for your students, it's worth it. So try it. Try it the next time that you're preaching a message to students. Just see how much can I get out without having to look back. It might not be overnight. It might not be your first time going and speaking to your students and being able to do it completely without notes. But try it. How long can I be talking without having to come back? Because think about it. Every time you come back and get in front of a barrier, you disconnect. You disconnect and you stop the conversation. It's like one of my biggest pet peeves when you're talking to somebody and every couple minutes as you're talking, they're like, no, keep talking. No, just, okay, sorry, what were you saying? You don't care what I have to say now because you keep picking up your phone and looking at it, and I'm not the most important person in the room. Make sure every student understands that they are the most important person in the room. Know your message and preach it in a way that is able to be a conversation. So, Justin.
Do you guys use slides?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have slides with verses. The main point will come up as well. And so that's something, if it's up on the screen, like here, you can use the thing like that. You're just trying to make sure that whatever's in front of you is not hindering your conversation with the students. But yeah, we use slides all the time.
The goal is the only time I ever look at my notes or we look at our notes is when we're reading God's Word. That's the only time we're ever looking down is when we're actually reading the Bible. But I even I can, if it's a verse that I just know or if it's short enough, I like to read the verse while looking at the students, And so, this weekend, we used a scripture that is just one of my favorite scriptures, Isaiah 26, 3-4. And so that was one that, if I can, and I can do it, I'd like to preach it while I'm looking at the students and say what the verse is, Now I'm trying to think what it was.
Did you have another question?
You will keep in perfect peace. There we go. All right. So go on. Yes.
It helps keep their attention, or versus not having them?
Oh, meaning if we weren't to have slides or versus having slides? For me, I think it helps the visual learners in the room. You're only going to reach probably 50% of the students solely on slides.
Yeah.
There's some students that are just audio learners. So you're going to preach to them and they're going to be like, oh, I got it. For me, no, I have to see it. What do the words look like on the screen? What does the verse say? How can I want to see what you're preaching. So for me, when I'm getting preached to, I want to see the slides. I want to see the picture of their family or whatever they're talking about. That helps me out, but it's not always going to help everybody, but I think it's good to have them. Cool, 10 minutes left. We got this.
Yeah. Let's just roll through because We got 10 minutes. We gotta go. Bring, 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 bring. It's gonna be on one of the two that I know. All right, equipping guide. So a lot of you received equipping guide. If you didn't, I would like to get that to you later. The reason why I think equipping guide is so important is we're communicating ahead of time what we desire for our volunteers. And the biggest thing I want to highlight is once you give an equipping guide to a volunteer, you go through it with them, but you're always reminding them every single week something about the equipping guide that we should be putting into practice. So what I challenge our volunteer leaders to do, like Titus, is every single week when we finish off service and before we leave, we're praying together to bring one thing to the table from the equipping guide that you can remind our volunteers to do. Whether it be, hey, just guys, remember the importance of consistency. This is why consistency is important within the lives of students. Hey guys, we talk about writing postcards to students. Here's a reminder of why we have postcards and why we believe postcards are so important. Hey guys, we talk about in our equipping guide modeling participation. Here's a reminder of why we model participation and why it's essential for the health of our students.
It just keeps it fresh in their mind.
Yeah, equipping is ongoing, and they should always be hearing about it to the point where they're sick of it. So I don't want to say that the equipping guide is like their Bible. I feel like that's a little too much, maybe a little hardcore. But what I'm trying to say is they need to know that book, that handout, inside and out, of what it means to live out the equipping guide. And we have this expectation that it's not like you're going to know it completely, right? But you should always be hearing it, so that way if we bring up a concept that's in it, then the volunteers know, oh, yeah, all right, modeling participation, I know about that.
Yeah, it's basically that idea that you can't be frustrated with a volunteer that's not being held to a standard if you didn't show them what the standard is. If you didn't make it clear to them on, this is what I'm holding you to, this is what we want to do. If they're not doing it, but they didn't know about it, well, that's your fault. That's not theirs, because they didn't know which standard to strive for.
And I'm sure everyone in this room at some point has had a frustration because someone placed a standard on them when the expectation was never communicated. If you know how that feels, we never want to do that to our volunteers. That's why we want to communicate it over and over again, because even hearing it once is not enough. Okay, all right, next one. If you want a rubber duck later, you can just come grab one, by the way. It's just, I understand.
All right.
You probably want a rubber duck.
Students on mission. So this is one that we are quite passionate about. In the summertime, it is really a big moment for our students to take massive leaps of faith. And there's one of two ways that they can do that. One being something that we do called Block Party. Block Party is something where that we've done here at Palm Valley Church a couple of different years. And it's basically where we throw a camp here at the church. It's not overnight, but it's like 3 or 4 nights of like session where they come in, there's a pre-party, there's a place where they can come in, worship, hear an awesome message, connect with people and things like that. And it's just a way in the summertime to continue to be challenged in their faith. A second thing that we do is called the Go Mission Trip. And so this is something out of Matthew 28, go and make disciples of all nations, And so as we do that, we challenge students to take place on a mission trip. And so they get to go on this mission trip for 7 days in high school, and we do one for middle school where they're on it for 3 days. And we just go to different local churches around the valley that can't put on a vacation Bible school themselves. And we say, hey, what if we sent you a team, brought all the supplies, and all you need to do is just open up the doors? And so we're able to partner with those churches and do that. And actually, Highway is here, and we stay in Highway's building for an entire week. They just literally let us sleep on their floor for an entire week. It's incredible. But the whole mindset behind all of this is we want to be pushing our students in some direction. They're either moving forward or backwards. Think about that. Your students are never just in idle mode. They're never just in neutral. You either push your students closer to Christ or you push them closer to the world. Which one is it? And every single weekend we have that opportunity. And so we want to challenge all of our students to be on mission with their faith, on a mission to tell people about Jesus, on a mission to have those conversations in their community, to invite them to church, to lead them to Christ, and also to get plugged in and live out their faith. Because if a student is living but they're not on mission, well, then they're going to begin quickly living in sin because they're not moving forward, they're moving backwards. And so in all of our messages and all of the things that we do, it's always coming back to, we end messages with the gospel prayer. We want to make sure that we're always giving them an opportunity. And actually, we had a series one time called Ready, Set, Go, where all it was is just talking about the way to lead someone to Christ, praying the salvation prayer with them. Because we believe that all students should be on a mission to reach people for Christ. But what's awkward is, what if someone comes up to you, you're a student, and it's like, hey, I've seen you at church, and you seem different than everybody else. Like, what do you have that no one else does? A relationship with Jesus. Hey, can I have that too? Yeah. I don't know how to lead you to Christ. Why don't you come to church with me and we can maybe find a pastor or something? That's weak, bro. Like that, if you put your eternity on something, you should be able to lead someone to that same hope that you chose to have, that you chose to begin a relationship with Jesus. So we want to make sure that our students are moving closer towards Jesus in all that they do. But as a youth ministry, we need to give them opportunities. We need to give them those opportunities to go and grow and do things that are outside of their comfort zones and do things that scare them. But when we look back at trips like this, we see the most amount of growth. I went on the Go mission trip every single year as a student, and it was the best week of my summer because we don't just show up and we all get into a van and go. We do 3 months of preparation beforehand because we say, hey, if you're serious about being on mission, well, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some commitment. We're not just going to show up and get to do all this fun stuff. No. We want to see that you're in your word. We want to see that you're connecting with God in your quiet time. And so just ask yourself as a leader, as a pastor, as a youth leader, like, what am I doing? What am I giving our students so that they can be living on mission as well?
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the best ways where we see spiritual growth in our students' connections, but above everything else, is our student mission trips. All right, we'll go ahead and spin that wheel. Woo! 2 more left. We're almost there. I got 3 minutes. Okay, office volunteers. So real quickly, like I mentioned, we are dependent on volunteers. Volunteers are not limited to just the weekend, a way that we are able to accomplish everything that we do when it comes to developing curriculum for groups, writing messages for the weekend, serious content, games, missions trips, camps, summer events, all these wild different things that we're trying to balance and everything is we have volunteers that come in during the week and help develop all these things for us. So it's not just our team making all of these things. We have people that specifically are just midweek volunteers that sometimes have helped us write curriculum. We have a team that makes the games for us, so we don't make the games. They make that for us. We have one of our volunteers who basically she handles all of admin for our team. I hate admin with a dear God passion, and the finance team hated me because I hated admin with a passion. So I brought in a volunteer. Her name's Kathleen, she helps out with all the admin type stuff for our ministry. So a great place or a great kind of people to be looking for who are midweek volunteers that are looking to give their time and want to be part of it is young adults. Young adults who are in college or only have a part-time job, or even if they have a full-time job but they don't have a family, they love to be a part of that. People who are retired is another great kind of person to look to. And then stay-at-home moms is another one, especially stay-at-home moms who are invested within the ministry. The name I just mentioned, her name is Kathleen. She's stay-at-home mom. All of her kids are in high school, middle school and high school. And so now they're at the point where she's like, they're old enough where they can take care of themselves. Like, I still have things to do, but not like when they were little kids. And now she's looking to fill her time. And she fills her time now by helping us out in the areas where we need where we need it the most.
Yeah. All right, what do you guys think the next one's going to be for all the marbles? Yeah. Okay. Know, share, buy into the vision. At Palm Valley Church, we exist to invite people to meet Jesus and follow him with our lives. That is what the vision that we follow, and that is what we do in every decision that we make from the top down. And so when you have a vision at your church, in your student ministries, in the ministry that you lead, you need to be relentless in letting everybody know what the mission is and why we do things. So recently, I just created kind of just a new system at the Buckeye campus where every single week, there's going to be a new first-time guest volunteer. So every single week, I'm going to designate a new volunteer so that regardless of who shows up, whether it's their first time or a millionth time, if it is someone someone who has never been in through these doors, there is a designated person for right when they walk in, immediate connection. Immediate connection of, hey, is this your first time here? No way. Can I help you fill out a connection card? Get you a bag with some goodies in there. I'm going to get you a name tag. And then bring them over to a group of students, another mentor. So if it was a female student and was walking in and I'm greeting them, I'm going to immediately, hey, thank you so much for being here. Get them connected to a female, to a group of ladies, and get them connected. Why do we do that? Because we want them to understand that they can be invited to meet Jesus and follow him with their lives. We can't follow Jesus if we don't feel comfortable at the church that we're a part of. Everything we do is so that people will have a relationship with Jesus, and we let them know that all the time. If you have leaders that don't know the vision, they can't buy into it. If you have leaders that know the vision and you remind them of it and you remind them of it and you remind them of it, you know what happens after a while? They buy into it and they lead other people to buy into it as well, right? But they only know that if you're letting them know and reminding them and showing them and living that out. So what decisions are you making as a leader that mirror and echo the vision that you have as a church? Ask yourself that so that you can be moving in that direction. We're so excited that you guys are here. It is 3:15, and we went through a lot of different stuff. If you guys wanted to ask some questions or had any questions at the end, we would love to hear from you. Just come up and share or ask us. But did you have anything, Zach?
No, let's just pray together, because at the end of the day, like, we're just sharing what we've learned over the years. We're hoping that out of everything we shared, there's at least one or two golden nuggets that you're able to take away and be like, oh, hey, that's a new perspective. That's a new idea. Let me try that. But at the end of the day, we got to remember that all health doesn't come from us. It's God. It's God's kingdom. He's the one doing it all. And the Holy Spirit is the one who's making the difference in the lives of these students. So Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for these amazing leaders who have stepped in here today, where we can have a conversation, a discussion with one another, talking about what it looks like to have a healthy ministry. God, we pray for our students, Father. God, we're praying that you are moving within their lives, that you're breaking down barriers, and God, that you're giving us and our volunteers opportunities to make a difference, so that way they are falling in love with you more and more. God, we understand that ministry is difficult. We understand that as we're seeking to serve you, there's a big target on our backs. And so, Lord, I specifically pray for all of these volunteers, God, that when difficult times hit, when the evil one tries to attack us, Lord, that we're able to lean into you, God, that our trust is fully found in you. God, that you use even the schemes of the evil one and flip it on its head, because, Lord, you use terrible situations and you turn it into something beautiful. And God, lastly, Father, we just pray that you use us as vessels to make a difference in the lives of the teenagers in our churches and in our communities. In your amazing name we pray. Amen.